In Berserk's beautifully painful Lost Children arc, we're told a story entitled Peikoff the Outcast. As it goes, a boy named Peikoff lived a long time ago in a forest village. Peikoff had pointed ears and red eyes and was adored by his parents in spite of them. But the village children were not so kind and took to bullying him and calling him names because of his strange appearance. With the negatives of his life overtaking the positives, Peikoff decided that this place could not be called his home with him constantly being treated this way, and that his parents looking so different from him must have meant that his origin lay elsewhere, that they weren't his real mother and father. One night, Peikoff snuck out of his house to try and find his true home, to find a place where he could live happily. So he journeyed to a forest said to be a haven for elves, thinking that this may be where he came from. Upon entering, he indeed saw that many looked exactly like him, and he was delighted to have finally found his home. However, one of the elves was quick to point out that he wasn't actually one of them. That he may have had the pointy ears and red eyes, but that he was bereft of the wings they used to ride upon the wind. In order to clear things up for Peikoff, another elf told him a short tale. Years and years prior, a human man and woman broke the law of their village and brought their baby to this forest in the hopes of curing him from a disease that had brought him close to death. They implored them all to save their child through any means possible, and the elves granted their wish by using their magic to heal the boy. This did the trick and spared the child's life, but as a result of it, his appearance permanently shifted to that of the elves, minus the wings of course. But regardless, the parents were overjoyed, as all that mattered to them was their son surviving. They then returned to their village with him, crying tears of happiness. As soon as Peikoff heard this story, he doubled back and headed straight for his village, realizing his mistake. However, by the time he reached his house, he was far too late. Time functioned differently in the Elven Forest, so although he had only been there for a short while, 100 years had elapsed in the village. In losing the only people in the world who truly cared for him without being able to realize this and convey his gratitude, and overlooking both his village, completely foreign to him now, and the Elven Forest, where his humanity was unwelcome. Peikoff the Outcast cried and cried, his red eyes swollen even redder. This is a sobering tale that is implied to be a sort of fantastical fable within Berserk, told to teach children the idea of being grateful for what one has and valuing it, drawing a parallel with the whole arc in a way in terms of its messages and grim yet mystical tone, as Lost Children is something of a macabre fairy tale. But the core of this fable, the character of Peikoff, what he learns, and how he gets stuck in between two worlds and cannot find a proper place for himself in either, draws a lot of parallels with much bigger aspects of this story, and the message leaves a lasting impact on Berserk in so many ways. During the arc, Peikoff is first compared to Puck due to the latter seeming to be a deviant elf in Rosine's eyes trying to lead Jill astray. And later on, some more significant parallels are directly drawn between Peikoff and Rosine herself, who, like the boy, is literally in between two worlds after having undergone her transformation through sacrificing her parents. She cannot be accurately described as a human anymore, but neither is she the elf that she claims to be, and so she doesn't belong to either world. Not really. Rosine's views of the world and herself were warped by the circumstances of her upbringing, having been abused by her father and exposed to all sorts of horrible things, having only known pain and violence, and having constantly dreamed of a world beyond all of that. She chose to run to try and become someone else, somewhere else, and she could not escape the reality of this world being permeated by suffering and pain, so she changed the complexion of that pain to something childlike and innocent, leading to her strange sense of morality and self-righteousness as she carried out her goals to lead to her perfect world. She's twisted beyond repair, doing all sorts of evil things while believing that it's all fine, that she's in the right, and that it's only the world that is wrong. After lashing out and overstepping her bounds, Guts takes care of her, and just like Peacock, as she descends dying, in her dreamlike state, Rosine thinks back to her parents and wonders if they're worried about her, ever so slightly hinting at the idea that maybe she regrets having done what she did, and that maybe she didn't treat reality like she should have, despite her father's inhumane abuse. I don't believe that this is in any way her or the story forgiving her father or whitewashing what he did, but rather more of a symbolic representation of the idea that regardless of how broken it was, that was her home and truth, and escaping through these dark fantasies was never going to get her anywhere in the long run. She would never really belong, and the world's cruelty would always be there no matter what she did. To be fulfilled, she would have to accept reality, live with it, fight, and try to find some light within the misery, as Jill sets out to do. But Rosine was never able to do that, and her mistaken impressions are given away early on as she compares herself to a quote-unquote real version of Peacock because of the idea that in her opinion, she, like him, belongs in the world of the elves. But the whole point of the story is that Peacock never actually belonged there. It's all a thought-provoking, sad, emotional dynamic that provides a great dimension to lost children. But while this comparison is very fitting, I think the most all-encompassing parallel that can be drawn is between Peacock and Guts. On one hand, we have Peacock the Outcast, whose biggest mistake was not realizing what he truly had until it was gone. And on the other, we have Guts, who states on multiple occasions that he himself doesn't realize the beautiful things he has until it's too late. With one such occasion being when he realizes that his place in the Band of the Hawk as the leader of the Raiders was the home that he was looking for his entire life. A revelation that is tragically brought to light far too late during a time in which the terrible wheels of fate had begun to turn to lead the band towards their inevitable doom. And the second occasion where he's forced to confront this fact is at the beginning of the Conviction arc, where he curses his choice to leave Casca behind, lamenting his constant tendency to not realize the things he has until they're gone or it's too late. As Godot tells him, don't abandon what you can't replace. Flora later states upon their meeting that his malice is what carries him forward and empowers him. But it also makes his sword blunt. It also chains him down and shackles him from living in service of what he truly desires. And even though he is with his loved one, he is not truly present when preoccupied with such reckless fantasies. So his whole struggle here is learning to wholly, fully protect and empower himself through that responsibility, to treat the things he values the way they should be treated, and stay true to them, which he failed to do prior to this. In addition, Peacock finds himself stuck in between the human and elf worlds, dwelling between the two while not belonging in either after time had elapsed. And this is exactly what Guts is like post-eclipse, locked in what the Skull Knight describes as the interstice, having escaped the claws of death, yet still being marked by the brand of sacrifice and being pursued by all manner of supernatural terrors in between the astral world and the physical human realm. This perpetual trial to stave off demons and his constant run-in with apostles puts him on a separate plane from the rest of humanity, but neither is he fully in the otherworldly astral realm either. Yet, if he were not pursuing a literal god for revenge, there would be ways for him to settle down and find a way to live. Elven dwellings such as Godot's Cave or any similar place to ward off spirits, help from friends, magic talismans introduced by Flora to ward off the malevolent spirits and prevent possession, similar objects with the same purpose, simply doing what he has been doing so far minus the chasing of the one who so cruelly betrayed him. He would still be pursued, but there are ways around that, and it is strongly implied that the thing preventing him from moving on is not the demons that try to take him, but his own ideals and attitude after having experienced the eclipse. His hatred that he cannot let go of. His dark beast that he tries to ignore. His vengeance spurs him on towards that side of the world and situates himself in between realms just like Peikoff, and so in using this analogy, his vengeance is the prime factor that causes him to be lost, just as Peikoff's desire for a true family despite having had that in the first place was his. In both cases, our character yearns, deeply desires for something beyond to satisfy a fervent urge inside them without pausing to look at the nature of the source of that urge, which would help them to see that what they seek will not bring fulfillment at all, and that they will lose so much as they leave their past and the things that really matter behind in their wake. The problem for Guts is not necessarily that he is in between two realms. It is the reason that he finds himself in between two realms, combined with his unwillingness to move on, focus on the right things, and seek peace. But as the story trudges forward, that attitude starts to fade and weaken quite beautifully. The tale of Peikoff concludes with him having realized his mistake all too late and breaking down into tears with no consolation. But Guts' story is not one that ends with him being doomed to a similar sadness. He makes the choice in conviction to fight to protect rather than destroy. He bears his heaviest burden yet, defending the one he loves while dealing with immense difficulties in and outside of himself. He finds himself a family, one that sticks with him and takes on his struggles as well. He then grows from there to spurn his inner demons and stay human, as difficult as it may have been, with the help of those around him. He stops trying to ignore the dark beast and instead conquers his darkness with invaluable help. And in the midst of the one he reviles, he does not succumb to rage, but instead backs away in service of a more important goal. Things will never be the same. And as he says, even if you force back what was lost, it still won't be the way it was. But the past is gone, and he continues to forge a future for himself. He pains, but endures. Eventually, amidst much difficulty, the one he loves most returns to him. It is tough at first, but they have all the time in the world to heal. And he keeps on living. And things slowly get better. For what seems like the first time ever, he can thank the world for not being quite as cruel as it could have been, and allowing him the chance to fully embrace the irreplaceable things he does have. His new life gives him a place to call home, and his feelings of revenge begin to fade as he slowly draws himself back. Not through choosing the plane of the humans, because both the friends he's made and the experiences he's had would make that impossible, but through finding a spiritual, more abstract home to settle in. As an outcast surrounded by fellow outcasts in a place in his life where he can truly, finally find peace. Perhaps symbolically, the world has caught up to him after the convergence of the realms brought forth Fantasia, and it is not pure chance that this coincides with him finding his place. Guts is someone that always clung to something as a crutch for one reason or another. Whether it be conflict and his sword because it was all he knew, or Griffith and his dream because of how brightly he shone, or his own ideas of becoming a friend to him, or revenge because it helped him to shut out his suffering. But now, he has matured, accepted the world, his sorrow and grief, and learned about how he can find a way to struggle to live. Not just exist and endure, but live. He is by no means completely through with his sorrow, and he will likely never be free of all the pain, because how could anyone in his situation ever make that sort of clean cut after what he experienced? But Guts is the last person in the world to expect life to be perfect and painless, and he is ready to move on, be free of those shackles, and try to walk away from rather than towards the abyss. He finally catches back up to the lesson he taught to Jill after we first hear about Peikoff, with friends and love surrounding him as he takes on this new challenge of simply living, in a world for which that in itself is desperately difficult. And while I did say that he was now in a group of fellow outcasts, the story implies that Peikoff only became one because he had nowhere to go to, no home or place to belong. But that can't really be said about Guts anymore, can it? Maybe for the first time, he is an outcast no longer. And while Peacock wasn't so lucky, maybe if Guts takes things day by day and focuses on what really matters, the struggler will finally be able to rest. Many thanks for watching.